collaboration between the CSOs and the state in ensuring gender-focused climate change policies. So without further ado, I would like to now call on stage the moderator of the panel discussion 3, Ms. Ravina Gounder. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Gounder is a student learning specialist at the University of the South Pacific. So I have much pleasure in inviting Ms. Gounder to please come on stage to proceed with the next panel discussion proper. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and participants, welcome to the second day of our conference. As we continue this journey of knowledge, exchange and collaboration, let us build upon the insights gained yesterday and forge new connections today. Together, we strive towards innovative solutions and a shared vision for the future. May today's discussion be filled with inspiration, constructive dialogue, and the collective determination to make a lasting impact. Thank you for being part of this transformative experience. It is my great honor to introduce our esteemed and trailblazing member of Parliament, who is the only female representative in the Vanuatu's Parliament, Honorable Julia King. Currently, she is the Deputy Leader of the Opposition of Vanuatu. She is also the Chair of Vanuatu Women in Sports. She is also the board member of VASNOC, Team Manager, Head Coach, Secretary, and the list goes on. From the marketing officer, from being FIFA beginner, youth coaching course, she's the FIFA grassroots. She's one of those marketing officers for women's football coaching course. She's amazing. So please put your hands together for Honorable Julia King. Thank you.
Oh, come on. Good morning, everyone. That's better. I just realized that I'm speaking after 10 speakers have spoken yesterday, and I'm going to try my best to say something profound that you haven't heard already. First of all, I'd like to honor the giver of life who's allowed us the ability to be gathered in this room today. I think we need to appreciate the fact that all of us from all different calibers, we can gather together in one room, and that's credit to Fiji Dialogue and IRI. Thank you for working so hard to get us all together here. I'd like to also say thank you for hosting us. We appreciate the hospitality, and I must say, a few nights husband-free and child-free can take a toll on me, so excuse me if I stumble a bit in my speech this morning, but it's an absolute honor to be here representing Vanuatu. I have not had the opportunity to speak much in the last 12 months, obviously, sitting in a room dominated by men. My colleague, fellow members who helped me run our beautiful nation of Vanuatu. But that being said, this conference has provided an inspiring platform where I'm sitting and listening with so much interest as to all the similar challenges and, that all our Pacific Island nations, but in this context, our Melanesian countries, Fiji and Solomons and Vanuatu, face in regards to gender-responsive climate issues. Someone prepared a very long speech for me, and I'm telling Aman I'm not going to be able to read the long speech, but I'm going to try and cover all of it because a lot of my colleagues who presented yesterday have said all there is to say about Vanuatu, and it's very challenging because the moderator just announced all the different hats that I represent, and I stand here in a crossroad because I represent communities. At the same time, I'm in government, and I'm supposed to help us all find a way and how we can help work forward. But I'm finding out that there's a lot of either overlappings and there's gaps. So I'll say what I need to say, and then I'm very sure that what I have to say you have heard already, but this is from my context. And in Vanuatu, we have been blessed to as you are, to be in a very beautiful part of the South Pacific Ocean. But at the same time, we are disaster prone. Vanuatu has experienced its fair share of tropical cyclones, and as you know, we had 3 last year, and the change of prime ministers caught up with that as well. We've had 3 prime ministers as well in the last 12 months. Flash flooding, volcanic eruptions, ash falls, tsunamis, severe inland wind, king tides, causing coastal erosions everywhere. All of this is happening because of the ongoing fluctuation of weather patterns, and I'm very proud to learn that Vanuatu has implemented its national policy on climate change and disaster-induced displacement, which was introduced in 2018. A lot of my colleagues here, and I thank you again, Dialogue Fiji. These are very strong women advocates who I've worked with in the past, and for the opportunity for us, most of us live on the same island, but we hardly have the time to come together and sit and actually chat about very important things. So the last day has provided me insights as to the struggles that CSO institutions face when working in collaboration with the government. But I believe you are here today because you were carefully raised. You were carried by a wonderful person for 9 months who helped raise you and fed you and allowed you to be the wonderful person you are today. So for that matter, I'd like for you to take this time to appreciate the individual who did everything in her own might, in her wisdom that was given to her to be able to raise a responsible and mature adult. And that's the reason why we're here this morning. I liked what the doctor said, that the professor from USB said yesterday, that gender needs to be people-centered. That's why we're here today. And a lot of these women-led organizations, community-based organizations, have implemented policy that can start influencing community members. But I must say this, we can speak as much as we want, we can discuss, we can design plans, we can talk about action plans, but we need to be able to go back to the community and actually deliver the messages in a way that they understand. Now, when we go back to the community, I'd like to share this bit of information to help you understand why I'm talking from a community base and not from the government down, because this is who I represent and this is what I stand for. When coming from a patriarchy system, as we all do, women leadership positions are passed through the men, our forefathers. And so when it was decided that I would run for office, even myself, I was not convinced that I was cut out for this job. And then my wonderful husband, father of my 4 kids, and he's been my biggest fan. He convinced me that I can do this. I've been an advocate for women in sport, women in business. I've stood on the sidelines and shouted at under 10 and under 16 kids, and I'd be able to do this. And as the submissive wife, I agreed to do it. But I must say that I said yes because of my respect for him. But in my mind, it was almost foreign because we had not had a female MP in the Vanuatu Parliament for over 10 years, and let alone the community where I come from that has 6,000 plus people. We've not had an MP for over 14 years. So it was almost a very foreign concept. I think the biggest challenge I had was convincing myself. And up until the moment my chief from my Nakamal, my community, stood up to advocate for me, he went to the media, he went to the papers, he went everywhere. He convinced everyone around him. Now, he's not just the chief from my community, he's also the chief, the chairman of the council, area council. He's also the chief of the Faturisu, which is the Efate Chiefs Council. So he's very prominent. And to have someone like that advocate for me, to tell me that I was able to do this, I'm telling you this because these are the examples examples we need to be able to move these climate change messages forward. We can talk about it, we can advocate, we can rally up all the women, we can empower them, we can give them the tools, but we need all our male champions to be standing behind us, with us, and lift us up, so to encourage us and inspire us, to tell us, convince us, in my case, that we can do this. There's nobody else that can do this better than all the mamas that are raising the future generations in our communities. They're the first teachers at home, they're the managers, they feed you food that you come home and you trust that the food you're eating is nutritious enough to help you grow. And so for that matter, I entrusted all my confidence in the process. Over this time, I've evolved so much. I've learned new things. I've celebrated highest victories and some very low defeats. And all in all, I'm smiling to my colleagues, because I have to sit in a parliament full of my male colleagues and try as much as possible to smile and be the wonderful person who makes it look to the children and the future prominent members of little girls, for future potential members of parliament, that it's going to be fine when you come and sit in here. It's not, because everything gets lost in translation. There's so many gaps. I'm learning firsthand that a lot of the fundings that come into the country, into the government treasury, does not go right through to the CSOs and the people who need them to be able to activate these climate action policies. And so these are the challenges that we are constantly facing. On Efate alone, where we come from, where Port Vila is, the effects of the impacts of climate change are evident everywhere. You've got the biggest potholes that even G-plated vehicles will go in and they won't last 12 months. And this is the reality that we are faced every day. But the commitment is there. The commitment is there, and we need to be able to translate these messages to the community in simple messages, and by form of storytelling, by giving them the tools they need to be able to educate each other on how to better manage themselves in the midst of climate change changes. I'm not going to even begin to tell you how we can better do this, because there's a whole list on the speech that has been prepared for me. But one thing that I know, a lot of these plans and implementation processes will only be possible if we get all the support, and that being funding, the support from CSOs, the government. But I want to personally appeal to the individual in you who has made up your mind to be in this room today. You agreed to be present in this room because you believed that as a collective we can be able to stand for Melanesia, for the South Pacific, for our communities to be able to initiate change. It's up to our government, it's up to our CSOs, but it's really within each of us to be able to carry that message forward. And so this dialogue is very important, and I'm asking my friends from Vanuatu, we've had many of these dialogues before, why are things not moving? Why are things not working? So we are not just here to reinvent another wheel, but we are here to keep inspiring each other that we as humans whom our Creator placed on this earth are capable of so much more. We have been created, we've been given the opportunity to dwell in this earth, to be able to look after it, but at the same time be responsible for our actions and understand the consequences of all the decisions that we are about to make. And traditional knowledge, that's the bit I want to emphasize this morning. A lot of our elders in the communities have been able to survive cyclones, have been able to survive natural disasters, and have come out resilient. We need to tap into that. We need to be able to engage with them consult, but at the same time allow them to allow the gap between traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge to be able to help us to carry on the quest of challenging this climate change. So collectively share our resources and information as we have done in the past days, but all in all, be reminded that we are not all alone in this. Everyone, we've arrived at this because everyone has taken part in a choice to be here and a choice to be part of this conversation, a choice to be part of this dialogue. So be empowered that we are here because we want to be part of change, we want to inspire change, we want to initiate change, but not just by formulating a policy and then letting the governments and the CSOs and whoever to deal with, like carry it out to the communities as individuals. And as mothers, we take it to our homes. We start off with our children. We talk to our neighbors. We talk to our villages and everyone that's around us. And as the professor encouraged us asked yesterday, the gender issues in regards to climate change have to be people-centered. If we do not include the people, and it's basic human psychology, everyone wants to feel special. So have an inclusive conversation where we encourage everyone that you are part of this journey, and if we don't do anything now, it's going to impact all of us. So I've promised my colleagues in Vanuatu that I will try my best to help them from up top the government, now with my newest hat bestowed to me as of 7 days ago as Deputy Leader of Opposition. But I also think that one of the biggest challenges, even in the midst of an emergency, in the midst of a crisis, we are still not able to access the support and the funds we need immediately. And that's one thing that was emphasized and pointed out to me. And I'm very honored that I could be addressing you this morning. I'm normally shouting from sidelines. I'm normally in the stands being a crazy soccer mom. So these issues regarding climate change and women is very close to my heart, and that's where my platform was and is. And so from me to all of you, it's not an issue that can be dealt alone. We are here as leaders to make a difference, and we cannot do it alone. We have to do it together. So thank you, Tomas.
Thank you, Honorable Julia King. Honorable Julia King, your unwavering dedication and exemplary leadership inspires us all. As the sole woman in the distinguished assembly, you bring a unique perspective that enriches our discussions. I really wish that the Member of Parliament in Fiji, women representatives, could be here as well, so we could have more discussions with them. Unlike most of the time, in most of the conferences I go personally, the women leaders in Fiji, they usually say that they're busy, but that was not the case during the campaigns. Anyway, moving forward, before I call upon the next panelist, I would like all the panelists to come up and please take your seat here. So I'm so sorry about this. We should have done this before. So Honorable Julia King, I would like to come here again. This will help us for the question and answers. Mr. Philip Subu, please kindly take your seat. Mr. Willie Misak, Mr. Neil Maharaj, and Mr. Kushal Raj. Also kindly requesting if everyone could take or wrap up the session in 10 minutes. We don't have a lot of time. Thank you so much. Our next panelist is Mr. Philip Subu. Philip is currently the president of the Malaita Provisional Youth Council, a body established to represent the collective views of Malaita Province young people to the national government in Solomon Islands. Philip is also the vice chairman of the Solomon Islands National Youth Congress, the umbrella youth body of Solomon Islands. Additionally, Philip is the program manager of Malaitolo Indigenous Guardianship Trust, a local NGO working with high schools in Malaita Province, introducing IT education and Tolo, which is the culture, education to the next generation. Finally, Philip is an advisory committee member of Windrock International Natural Resources Management US Scale Project in Malaita Province. Please put your hands together for Mr. Philip Subu.
Thank you, moderator. I would like to thank Dialogue Fiji and IRI for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of the rural youths of Malaita Province, and not only the voice of rural youths, but the voice of young people of Solomon Islands. First of all, I acknowledge the traditional landowners of Matagali of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and the Fijian elders of other communities who may be here today. Greetings, esteemed colleagues, policymakers, and distinguished guests. I am honored to represent the community-based organizations from Solomon Islands at this crucial regional conference focusing on gender-responsive climate policy in the Pacific Islands. Recognizing the agency of addressing climate change and its disparate impacts on vulnerable communities, my presentation aims to shed light on unique challenges faced by the Solomon Islands and propose strategies for a more inclusive and effective climate policy. Let me bring us to the context or the background a little bit on how CSOs and the state are working in Solomon Islands. First, Solomon Islands as a country with a weak political system and lacks proper tools to navigate through its challenges because of its multi-ethnic diversity. It is quite complicated for a song or message to be in one direction tune. This perspective was taken as in our context that CSOs could be the very reason, the very person in the state. The state in its very pure form doesn't have much tendency to connect CSOs with the government. Second, the prevalent lack of understanding among policymakers about the specific challenges faced by communities in Solomon Islands. In the case of Solomon Islands, the state doesn't have any influence in CSOs. It is the society and the agenda that influence the CSOs. Many communities are not fully aware of the implications of climate change and how it directly affects their lives. In the perspective of CSOs and the government doesn't create a strong legal footing for CSOs to create their foundation under relevant law. In practical sense, the CSO bill is still a garbage somewhere. Politicians use it as a political tool to advance interest and to navigate their way out from being criticized. Or when they are putting a registered jacked, they are called CSOs. In moving forward, in terms of collaboration, and there needs to be an insightful, realistic assessment on how gender will be a key driver in terms of climate policy. Past records and data must be used to make sound decisions to reach good focus on gender sensitivity in action, in climate action policies. Secondly, there must be genuine engagement between state and CSOs. A very good example is sometimes CSOs are only being used for ticking the boxes for the state. And so CSOs must be part of the policy formulation process and also the implementation phase. CSOs work in a space where the state cannot reach. This is where CSOs play a vital role. And that's true in Solomon Islands, where if you're in the rural area, you will see that the presence, the visibility of the government is when you see schools or nurses or police officers. But in a lot of the areas that the state cannot reach, you will see the presence of CSOs. So CSOs play a very important role in working closely with communities. Gender sensitivity in climate policy formulation need to be proven if it is truly a workable way forward. Sometimes, gender must not be used as a tool to garner financial support, while the realistic and deadly effects of climate change is not addressed to its core in strong policy formulation processes. There needs to be targeted awareness campaigns at the grassroots level to educate communities about the impacts of climate change. The creation of community-based forums and workshops to facilitate open discussions and knowledge sharing. The inclusion of community representatives, particularly women who are often primary stewards of natural resources, in the formulation of climate policies, establish mechanisms for regular feedback and consultation between policymakers and communities. Next, work on capacity building initiatives to empower community-based organizations in Solomon Islands to actively engage in climate policy advocacy, partnerships with international organizations to provide training and resources to enhance the effectiveness of local organizations. And finally, fostering collaboration between community-based organizations, policymakers, academics, and other stakeholders through shared resources and expertise. In conclusion, my presentation seeks to bring attention to the critical issues faced by the Solomon Islands in the context of climate change by fostering understanding, collaboration, inclusivity. We believe we can collectively work towards gender-responsive climate policies that truly reflect the needs and challenges of our communities. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to fruitful discussions and collaborative initiatives. Tage Tumas and Bula Vinaka.
Thank you, Mr. Philip Subu. Our next panelist is Mr. Willie Misak. Mr. Willie Misak is currently a PhD student at the Victoria University of Wellington, doing his research in Vanuatu under the Nature-Based Urban Design for Adaptation and Wellbeing in Oceania project. In Vanuatu, he is also doing his research and also supporting Nature-Based Solutions project of the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, as well as support the Vanuatu government on the loss and damage work under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. At the grassroots level, he is the founder and executive director of a youth-led organization, Learn to Serve Vanuatu, with the aim to support the community building process. Thank you so much. Now welcome Mr. Willie Misak.
Thank you, moderator, for the introduction. I'm so humble. Good morning, everyone. There is a lot of discussion happening yesterday, and the topic that was been given to us with my fellow colleagues, speakers here, is enhancing a collaboration between CSO and state. I was thinking to change this way of giving this dialogue into a video, but I realized that my video is 30 minutes long, so I will change into something more shorter. The Vanuatu Climate Action Network is established in 2013 by under one of the projects called the Climate Ready Project, and it has actually 70 organizations that includes international organizations, academia, regional and national NGOs, faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, national and local NGOs, and also private sector. We have a good collaboration with the Vanuatu Business Resilience Council to support all the works of the Vanuatu Climate Action Network. And the network is working in climate change advocacy, environmental protection, and sustainable development. After its establishment in 2013, Vanuatu Climate Action Network has contributed on the development of the climate change disaster risk reduction policy of the Vanuatu government, 2016 to 2030. And we have working under 3 different working groups. We have the Climate Finance Working Group, the Policy Working Group, and the Advocacy Working Group that focuses on different areas. That we help local NGOs to develop different activities and also make sure that they have access to different funding opportunities to the very grassroots. And from that perspective, we develop activities that will influence the development or review of the policies, especially the climate policies. To enhance the collaboration between CSOs and the state, Vanuatu Climate Action Network and the Vanuatu government had created a unique sense of collaboration that allowed the CSOs to contribute meaningfully in the decision makings and policy development. One of the tools that Vanuatu Climate Action Network is using to collaborate with government and the other organizations is the meaningful consultation. Frank, this passionate and cordial consultation is vital to success of any collective enterprise, and its centrality to the functioning of the institutions is one of the hallmarks of the operations of the Vanuatu Climate Action Network. The purpose of such consultation is not only to provide a framework within which collective decisions is being taken. It is means of harmonizing points of view, promoting unity among the members of the community, of strengthening the bonds of trust and love between individuals and institutions, and of allowing new insights into complex issues to be brought forth and examined dispassionately. It is also serves to foster systematic action, preserving focus among the participants in a given line of action and allowing for diverse perspective to be integrated into groups of understanding of the issues at hand and guiding the progress of their related activities. In this regard, consultation is an essential component to the mode of learning adopted by Vanuatu Climate Action Network across the range of its endeavors. As a result, Vanuatu Climate Action Network sits in the National Advisory Board of the on Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction, for short, NAP. And the NAP board is one of the mandatory board under the Vanuatu government to review all the climate policies and also climate actions and activities at the nation. Within that, the Vanuatu Climate Action Network sits in the Climate Finance Working Group of the Vanuatu government under the Ministry of Climate Change, as well as the Policy Working Group of the government, as well as the Project Screening Committee under the Ministry of Climate Change, where we, together with the government, analyze and screening all the different projects that is coming in. So Vanuatu did not need a new policy if we think about that policy on gender-sensitive climate change, but to work on the implementation of the current policy by mainstreaming gender sensitivity into the local actions to inform effectiveness of the current policy and its review and adaptation based on the realities of the different communities on how they put into practice the activities under the policy. So our current policy will be only reviewed and implemented and make sure that we have mainstreaming gender sensitivity into it. Colleagues, I will stop here for my talk, and I will be happy to take more questions for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Misak. You can all ask your questions after all the discussions are over. Our next panelist is Mr. Kushal Raj. Mr. Kushal Raj has just joined the CI Pacific team as the Pacific Policy Director. Kushal is based in Suva, Fiji, and works closely with CI Pacific Region, CI Asia Pacific Field Division Team, Global Pacific Team, and NCS APFD team in furthering policy priorities in the Pacific. He will focus his work on supporting policy engagement to facilitate blue carbon, climate, ocean, biodiversity, and other higher quality policy outcomes, including carbon credits, generation, and trading in the region. Prior to joining CI, Kush has worked for the Fiji government as the Director of Climate Change. He provided managerial oversight to Fiji's Climate Change Division through its supervision of works in climate change adaptation, mitigation, climate finance, and on oceans or blue economy. He is a strong advocate of community-based engagements in decision-making and inclusivity across all levels to enhance the sustainability of ambitions. Please put your hands together for Mr. Kushal Raj. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, Dialogue Fiji, for having Conservation International as part of this dialogue. I, in fact, step in here today for our Vice President, Ms. Susanna Tuisese, so I hope I justify stepping in. And I really want to echo, the sentiments of Honorable Julia this morning. I think she did an amazing opening of the panel this morning by relating to the role of women, which is really unique, and this is why we are here, and mentioning how women, with whatever worldview they have, nurture us into what unique individuals we are and bring us into this space. And indeed, as CSO and NGO sector, we follow the high-level policy that's set by government, and we try and justify various indicators into our programming and lead some of these envisions that the Fiji government and other governments in the Pacific, where CI is, in particular in Samoa, Palau, and New Caledonia, filter into our programming through nature-based solutions, whether we do oceanscapes, marine protected areas, blue carbon, or other community outreach. In my previous capacity, and I'm very new to CI, of course, in the Fiji government, when we do negotiations and climate change adaptation corps, Pacific participation by women is very limited. It's in fact shortfall of about 30 to 40% in negotiations. So these are the statistics in terms of the alarming figures of women participation, and you'll see this across in the Pacific as well, where women are not given the right voices. And even in Fiji's policies, you don't see clear targets. They're not quantified in terms of the percentage of women participation, in terms of the percentage of indicators we want to see for women, but they're very high-level policies. So this is indeed a gray area where we can work on, but there are a lot of good relevances and best practices set by the Fiji government. In fact, CI's major niche in the Pacific is Fiji government. And I would like to in particular mention the Public Financial Management Improvement Plan that was done in Fiji within 2018, 19, and 2020 to basically look at the budget taking process. When we talk about programming, when we talk about indicators and in particular gender issues, it does not go without financing. So if you do not have gender mainstreaming through budgeting processes and it's not mainstream, then please do not talk about these indicators, because they will not happen. And this is the vision that CI Pacific carries as well. We ensure that part of our programming is informed by budgetary processes. So you need to have a budget plan which ensures that these indicators can be financed, and you have the right outreach to communities to measure this in your monitoring plans and indicators. So that was a good best practice that Fiji did to kind of initiate this process. And of course you need the data and statistics out of this disaggregated data to kind of then overlap and see how this will map your programs across. So indeed those kind of practices set the setting stone, and having the right financing mechanisms will only ensure that we can deliver what we aspire. Apart from that, of course, the Climate Change Division where I was, which is now the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, has various policies and plans to kind of envision women participation, including the National Climate Change Policy, the National Ocean Policy, which is again, underpinned from the development plan for Fiji. And this again goes back to the gender policy for Fiji, the National Disability Policy, and the National Youth Policy. Like I've mentioned, they don't have quantified targets, and it's a gray area probably we should talk about as to how we kind of quantify and bring more indicators, which can then basically filter down to how CSOs and NGOs operate in the region, and then basically help us track and monitor some of them as we move across. One also other important process I want to talk about in Fiji's participation in the gender space is the development of Fiji's GESI policy, which is basically the gender inclusive policy for the Ministry of Finance. This was done as part of its accreditation process to the GCF. Like I've said, financing is very crucial, but then you needed a social policy or a gender policy to match some of the indicators that Fiji would then take to the NFCCC convention. So that's another best practice that kind of spills out some of the key indicators the Ministry of Finance would measure as part of this process in its climate division then. However, these are very high-level policy frameworks and they don't have indicators. And for CI Pacific, we would basically then be guided by high-level policy. So when we talk about these nexus between regional partners, CSOs and NGOs and governments, I think it's very clear we have these kind of very clear indicators to guide us. There are few key pillars that we need to mention when we talk about gender in the climate change space, and one of them is that women should be driven as agents of change, because like I've said previously, and again basing on the context from Honorable Julia, is that the diverse kind of knowledge and basically skills that women have, or this is basically gender appropriate. And so we need to recognize that. Secondly, we need to look at social adaptation, and we need to look at this as part of government plans and policies. When I say social adaptation, I mean to say that the rights of women have a direct impact on the welfare of children, the elderly, and the disabled. Hence, they need to be treated separately. Thirdly, we need to ensure that the benefits are progressive and they're effectively realized. This means that Fiji's response to climate change or any other country in our region does not or should not include actions that reinforce the elements of traditionally and socially constructed roles for women. They need to be more diverse, they need to be more futuristic. Fourthly, we must understand the influence on climate change on gender gaps, and these are varied. The effects of disaster on women, on gender and on vulnerable groups are very different across, and they impact us accordingly, whether it's to do with the impacts on food, water, nutritional, and energy access. We also need to plan for solutions that reduce inequality, so we not need to only do this at the policy level, but really planning at the investment level and down at the activities level and at the programming level, so that the indicators are addressed as part of the continuous monitoring and post-evaluation works, so that you can rapidly progress and quantify this through data and statistics, and then future-proof your plans to include some of these gender-sensitive indicators. Also, CI's niche is again working in the nature space in the region, and we emphasize that natural resource management is not gender neutral. It definitely is not. The way women associate with nature is very different in terms of resource management, and they have a unique relationship with nature. And so these needs to be appropriately triggered in terms of the call from the Biodiversity Declaration under the Global Biodiversity Framework as well, with the CBD Convention, which also calls for women's traditional knowledge to be utilized to improve conservation effectiveness in keeping with the objectives of the Nagoya Protocol, the Aichi Biodiversity Targets, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Further to this, with CI, basically we partner with communities, women leaders, and women organizations to support women's leadership in conservation, in decision-making across all levels. And this includes facilitating and conducting separate and additional meetings and workshops. We also promote women leadership and fellowships, and the Right Honorable Jacinta Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, is an example that has joined CI to promote more women leadership in the region. And of course, CI also recognizes the role of gender equality, addressing both men and women rights. Conservation International also recognizes gender expansive identities of people who do not identify with traditional gender roles and works to promote safe space for everyone to express their gender identity in their authentic selves. I'll just quickly mention some of the tools CI uses in the Pacific before I wrap up. And we have gender and social equity and in conservation guidelines. We also use gender-based violence in community conservation programming, gender mainstreaming plan templates, and gender tagging systems. It works very similar to the budgeting system that is trialed by the Fiji government. So these are various means by which we work in the Pacific. And our key principles, again, I would just like to wrap up, is by directing meaningful benefits, we co-design conservation activities to be useful and accessible to women and men, ensuring that project benefits target communities, priorities, and are equitably distributed. Also increasing women's access to and control over resources. Our projects help women benefit from and make decisions about material, financial, human, social, and political resources, and elevating women leaders. We partner with women and their organizations to support their leadership and effective conservation and decision making. And I'll probably talk a bit, with the iwi Foundation at the back to see how maybe CI can better support in the region. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I will take more questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kushal Raj. Our next panelist is Mr. Neil Maharaj. He is the Executive Officer at Rotary Pacific Water for Life Foundation. Today we are honored to glean insights from someone who has over 25 years of private sector and civil society organization experience, and Mr. Neil Maharaj is from Suva, Fiji, and I would like to invite Mr. Neil Maharaj on stage now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To imagine a day without water is a reality for many Fijians and Pacific Islanders. I do realize that I'm standing between you and the morning tea, but please, I beg your pardon to hear me out for a short intervention I'm making. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on the invitation of Dialogue Fiji and IRI, and also an absolute pleasure to join the only woman MP and the young panelist that is up here with me. So, a bit of background as to what we do at Rotary Pacific Water for Life Foundation. You can visit our social media page. Our core vision is to provide access to safe drinking water and adequate sanitation to rural communities around Fiji. And we are one of the very few organizations, along with Habitat, who are doing infrastructure works. And 90% of work is construction, building tangible projects on the ground. So while it's good to have a soft discussion and dialogue here, it's also equally good to do infrastructure projects in the communities. With our research over a decade, we find that 90% of women in rural areas are responsible for collecting, storing water, and also cooking food, let alone helping in agricultural spaces and also in income generation in rural communities. Also, what we realize is that when we go to a particular community, out of, say, for example, argument's sake, 100 houses, we find that only 20 or 10 houses or 30 houses will have actually a proper water systems and actually a washroom. Now, what happens to the rest of the 90 houses who don't have a washroom at their house? It's very hard to imagine when you're standing in urban cities and towns, but the other 90% basically practice open defecation. And what is that? Basically going to the seaside, riverside, or in the bush. And that is a reality, a hard reality that we are not talking about, okay? It's an unsexy topic to talk about during before morning tea, but it is something that you need to imagine and think about it when we're having regional dialogues and international dialogues of such nature. So, even more challenging is that when you don't have, let alone be having access to like ad hoc water, but let alone not having access to clean water, how do women, girls, and children at schools and villages maintain menstrual hygiene? We had some discussion yesterday with some ladies here. And I'm proud to stand as a man and talk about these topics because at our organization, we find it very challenging to get women join in an organization that does construction. I would Habitat would agree with me, but there are very less or really no women we find in Fiji that has a Bachelor of Construction or Bachelor of Civil Engineering or Bachelor of Water Engineering. So organization like for us at Rotary Peace for Life Foundation, I challenge the gender and the women around this room here as well. Can we generate more water engineers? Can we, that are women? Can we generate more civil engineers that are women? Because in Fiji, we're trying to find, and I was able to find only 2 in their organizations. And when we have, some challenging circumstances where donors have their criteria that 70% should be women in organization, 70% of leadership should be in women organization, how do we meet that criteria? When we know that no organizations, no institute in Fiji actually provides training or qualification in water engineering. And while we were the only first to pioneer women plumbers training to the EU project that we implemented between 2020 and 2024, there are no other organizations that are actually empowering or other genders, including women and people with LGBTI, to undertake such courses where they can join organizations that are engineering background or they have construction background. So that is something that, while we're talking about climate and gender, but this is something that we are facing also in our ground. So we have also a male person who goes out in the communities, in the schools, talk about menstrual hygiene, talk about proper hand washing tactics, where water is challenging in communities. Not only that, when you talk about gender, what we find is that we do an analysis or profiling or survey for program interventions. It's very challenging to find data on LGBTI. Because when we have, although we have surveys and forms that actually ask you that which gender do you conform to, there are a lot of hesitancy in getting the data. So we are working with Rainbow Pride Foundation to build our capacity that how do we ask this question to other genders or people who conform to other genders. So having said that, while the water and sanitation issues are being challenging, finding women in leadership positions in water roles are also very important. We actually have a very strong criteria in our office that any water committee that we're forming, there must be at least 2 women that should form part of the governance structure in rural communities. Even that is challenging in a patriarchal society like Fiji. So those are compulsory criteria that we are putting up so that we can include women as part of the governance structure. And then we have climate change that is impacting our work. So changes in the lack of rain, drought, causes water sources to dry up, surface water sources, groundwater sources, boreholes, dry up. Then we have flooding that contaminates the water. And then we have sea level rise, where saltwater intrusion basically contaminates the fresh water. And then we have, whilst melting glaciers are providing fresh water, they also get contaminated when they meet salt water as well. And then, of course, waterborne disease rises as well. So, connecting women, water, and then climate change, and coming to gender, is that we are trying to work, and also on my topic of CSO and NGO partnership on the area of gender and climate change. We have established a memorandum of understanding, MOU, with the Department of Water and Sewerage, with Water Authority of Fiji, with Ministry of Health, and with Mineral Resources Department. These are key government departments in Fiji that work in water and sanitation to address the issue of women, gender, and water. And that is something that is also challenging because when you talk with, when you are working with the government departments, there's a lot of bureaucratic processes that we need to be mindful of, and that is something that I'd like to leave with a food for thought in terms of the action plan that we are doing. That how do we balance our role as watchdogs and also as implementers of the tangible projects. While many of us have actually moved away from being watchdogs only, we are implementing actual tangible projects on the ground. It's important that government is able to recognize that and have a data reporting system where holistically they don't only report what government has done, but also what civil society organizations like us are doing in this space. Second thought for food for thought before I leave is the transparency and accountability in reporting. We find that there are some cases where reporting by the governments are exaggerated, are inflated, and I'll give you a case study. About 4 to 5 years ago, a media organization published in the front page, which says Fiji has access to, Fiji population, 92% of Fiji's population have access to water. Now that's put us in a very critical situation because the National Development Plan reports otherwise, that there's 0% of access to water, clean water and adequate sanitation in rural communities. And the reporting says that 92% of Fiji population have access to water. So when we are applying for grant to donors, when those data come out which are not correct, are actually impacting the good work that we want to do on the ground. I do realize I'm passing the time. So also again, before I leave, put a channel there that we can encourage more women, girls to join the engineering sector, and so that we can have a more balanced gender in our work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Neil Maharaj, and thank you for pointing out that we need more women as civil engineers and water engineers. That's something I think we all need to look into. And if you have young women and girls back at home who are asking you what course to take at USP or FNU, do let them know about civil engineering. That's something that USP offers, FNU offers. That's where the scholarships are. So that's something we can work towards. Thank you so much for saying that. A heartfelt thank you to all our esteemed panelists for sharing their expertise and insights. And thank you so much for availing yourself for these panel discussions. I understand that you all have busy schedule, and especially to Honorable Julia King, I was really looking forward hearing from you. And I'm so glad whoever the moderator was canceled at the last minute, so I got the opportunity to actually introduce you, and at the same time hear from you. Not only that, just availing yourself and coming here means a lot to all of us women and girls here, and I'm pretty sure to the men too. And also, I would like to say, if any one of you know anyone from the Fiji government representatives, please let them know we need you in our panel discussions so you can hear us. Because our major focus yesterday was that there are a lot of policies, there are a lot of talks about it, but there's no implementation. You know why there's no implementation? Because of this. We don't have leaders sitting here in our panel discussions to actually hear us out and implement these policies. So thank you so much. I would like to give a round of applause to all of them again. Thank you so much. Now we'll open the floor for questions. So please ask your questions, just one question each, and yeah, just answer their question and we can move on to the next question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Casper, and I represent the people with disabilities, Solomon Islands, as the CEO in the organization. I have no question here, but I have just a comment, general comment to make, if you can allow. First of all, to congratulate Honorable Julia in her presentation. Talking about champions, I really endorse your statement in terms of collaboration with the family and the submissive of the respective family that you have. Some of us, myself, I have been a male champion for 6 years, serving the National Council of Women. And the legacy that male sets in that organization is to have 4 women now in parliament. And this is something of great gender and equality that should be taken on board and consideration in terms of partnership that we're talking about, rather than imposing issues that will segregate men and women. The only other thing that I want to raise here, Honorable, is an appeal to you in your respective status. I know that the Melanesian Spearhead Secretariat is in Vanuatu. And this congregation here is a well-organized, and I thank IRI for organizing this, to bring the Melanesian fora to sit and discuss the commodities affecting our issues, affecting our lives in the Melanesian fora. And I don't know why PNG is not here. And of course, I would like to appeal to the honorable member to take the message back to the Secretariat of the Melanesian Spearhead Group in Vanuatu and explore the idea of having a Melanesian fora sitting and participating in decision-making that will influence the leaders of the Melanesian Spearhead Group. Perhaps it is time to move on and to advance these agendas, not only in this room, but when we talk about funding, when we talk about policies, where do we end from here? And I think this is a great question to conclude this conference as to where do we go. And I'm suggesting here that perhaps in the Melanesian Fora we have a greater opportunity ahead, that we need to take these agendas to our prime ministers. They sit in the Melanesian Spearhead Group talking about us, yet we don't talk about what decisions they make. And therefore, I would propose that as a recommendation to you and of course to the Vanuatu team to influence the Melanesian Secretariat to start looking at influencing their guiding principles to include CSO's participation in such a forum that would make recommendations direct to the prime ministers when they meet. So what I'm simply mean is prior to the Melanesian Spearhead Group Prime Ministers meeting, the CSO's fora could meet ahead of that and provide recommendations to the prime ministers. And that would be a kind of partnership enhancing decisions that we could make to influence political decisions, administrative decisions, and therefore we can see an impact of where the policies lie. And that's the kind of recommendation I would like to put forward here. The other thing is for those of you probably in Fiji, it's not a question, but Fiji has a social benefit policy. We talk about social inclusion here, but do we know that Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and PNG has no social benefit policies? I don't think so. These are great agendas. Perhaps Fiji can lend us a hand and to help us with RA support to sort of, okay, Solomon Islands, you don't have a social benefit policy, where we can then, when we disasters, we look at supporting direct people with disabilities, the elders in the communities. But because we lack those kind of social benefit policies, this is where we can talk about climate change effects affecting us, but we don't have those policies to guide the donors to support us in that field. And therefore, I think we need the hand of our Melanesian friends here who already has those policies. As one of the panelists was talking about, probably it's time. We partner about these things in terms of coming here and talking about them, but we never partner in terms of the realities. Take, for example, but again, I'm saying I'm not raising those questions, but I'm just raising those comments and observations. And the question I want to pose here is, where are we going from here? And those are my suggestions.
Thank you so much,
much.
sir. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your presentations. I actually don't have a question, just comments. Neil, I really liked what you said about having more women in non-traditional roles, and I completely agree with that. But I also want to put it out there that with that comes a responsibility, corporate social responsibility, where companies that hire women should have mandatory sexual harassment policies, as well as have gender-sensitive trainings, because I have had friends who work in these non-traditional roles, and that kind of harassment they face makes them leave the job. And then there is another thing that we need to focus on is the brain drain. When women, it's hard to keep civil engineers here, not just women, because overseas markets give them more pay than we can afford. So we are losing a lot of our graduates because of that. And lastly, in terms of construction and other non-traditional trainings as well, DIVA for Equality Fiji actually does a lot of training, so I just wanted to point that out. It's not just one organization. DIVA concentrates a lot on non-traditional representation of the LGBTI communities in roles like constructions. They've run plumbing workshops, carpentry workshops, and a few others.
Thank you for this issue. I feel sorry for those of your friends who have had bad experience in this sector, but as I said, we are a non-government organization, and we have a prerequisite and mandatory systems in place, including having sexual harassment policy, having child protection policy. These are mandatory requirements for NGOs. And I'm pretty sure if you talk to 3 girls in our office, they will be more than happy to share with you the wonderful and the safe environment that we have in our office. So, but I do acknowledge your intervention. There has been some cases probably in the private sector. And as I said, we work with the Rainbow Pride Foundation for now to build our staff capacity in collating LGBTIQ data.
So I don't know if you're aware that your Prime Minister has had a very clear position and has mentioned it to the regional caucuses and meetings that he is not supportive of gender diverse people, LGBT, etc., etc. It's not in his values. He doesn't see it working for Vanuatu. But from a provincial council perspective, and if you're thinking about collaborating with state, which I believe this whole panel is about, how are you going to address that gap, that data gap, and the need to be socially inclusive towards LGBTIQ people?
Thank you. Yeah, our Prime Minister have made a stand on that issue. As far as our Youth Council and the National Youth Congress is concerned, we haven't discussed more on that. And that if I can give you the right answer, at the moment, we haven't worked on any strategy or policy in addressing that. Yeah, it's an interesting issue. Like I've said in my opening remarks, Solomon Island is a multi-ethnicity country, and also it's a multi-cultural and also religious nation. And so, in promoting such agenda, it requires collaborative and wider consultation with young people. Yeah. So I'm not in the better position to give you the correct answer, but yeah, that's all I could say.
In Vanuatu we have V-Pride, so you're aware of that. I think the topic is very also sensitive in a cultural perspective, as you know, that our Melanesian cultures has also another, sort of barrier coming into addressing that. And it raises really the questions about how do we define gender when it comes to cultural norms, when it comes to even religious norms, and when it comes to different perspective from, we're saying, from the Western norms, and also looking at the United Nations Charter as well. So those are the way, those are not really only the way that we're looking at it, is that when we want to address that, especially LGBTQI, let me be more specific on that, because maybe this is something that we also feel so sensitive about it to talk about in those spaces, but we have to intertwine all those different perspectives, cultural norms, religious norms. You know, Pacific people, most call them Christian countries. We have that religious perspective that's intertwined within everything that we are doing. So it's a very sensitive issue, but in the Vanuatu Climate Action Network, we provide space for them also to speak in that. But getting into the policies, getting into the national constitution and so on, that's a deep discussion, because, as I say, it's a very complex issue when you're looking at different norms, whether it's religious, whether it's our cultural norms, and even in the different areas and spaces where different working policies influence us in how we try to reshape our norms according to it. So I think I echo my colleague here. It's a very complex.
Thank you for that. Yes, I know V-Pride exists, and I guess to also help all of us shift our mindsets away from dark, gloomy conversations and making this very rigid, I'd like us to talk about the successes. So Vanuatu is very, very successful compared to the Solomon Islands. You've made leaps and bounds in already incorporating and involving people in conversation. So I guess we need to focus on that and celebrate on it. And this is one of the reasons why I chose, I'm sorry if this was a lot of pressure on you, Solomon Islands, but I just wanted to know if that was even part of your thinking and realization that there's somebody missing at the table in conversation. Because that's where Solomon Islands is at, and that's why I had the question for Solomon Islands. The question hasn't been brought up. The elephant in the room hasn't been addressed. There hasn't been enough strong patriarchal people who've started the disruptive conversation in the spaces. And I guess that's where the success of Fiji comes in. We've disrupted comfortable conversations, and we've made it a little bit more difficult because there are people who are hurting. That's what's important. We need to realize that there's men, there's women, and everybody else that doesn't conform to the two are literally in the gutters. That's just what I wanted to encourage us, just to shift mindsets.
Yeah, let me give up. Yeah, I think we don't have any evidence, I mean empirical evidence, but from observations, it's an issue that many Solomon Islands and even young people might not accept it right now to discuss it. And so it's something that trying to change someone's mindset and belief, it will take time. Yeah. So we're at the moment, what I would say is we are not ready to discuss the issue yet. Yeah. It will take time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing up about the LGBTQI community, because rather than just storming out the room, you actually wanted to know if, those of you who are here, you know what I'm trying to say. So you try to put that in the conversation, and I think this is a safe space where we can have the difficult conversation about the sensitive issues. So thank you so much for bringing that up. We'll have a last question. Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My question will directly go to Mr. Willie Misak. Just to clarify or to point out, Willie, since we're talking about enhancing the collaboration between CSO and government, firstly, can you clarify how the CSO step in the space of climate justice and climate change, also taking voices for the women at the grassroots level? And number two is how this CSO, civil society, or VCAN, help to inform a policy engaging with the academia, and yes, inform the Vanuatu government in terms of human rights and climate change in Vanuatu. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned, Vanuatu Climate Action Network has more than 70 organizations that are part of the network, which is academia, it's one of them. So under the academia, Vanuatu Climate Action Network is also doing research with academia at the National University of Vanuatu, the Queensland University, the Australian National University, doing different research in that area to see how we continuously enhance our collaboration, not only with the academia, but also have an understanding that the academia have themselves another sort of hand-long collaboration with their governments, like the government of Australia or whatever university that we are connected with. Sorry, your other question is around the climate justice, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion. So the International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion is an initiative from the Vanuatu Climate Action Network, bring it into the government discussion. And that's one of the highlights of the collaboration, the effective collaboration between civil societies and the government. I think the tool that I mentioned, the consultative tool that we are using, was one of the very I would say innovative in a sense, because we're trying to apply principles of mutual trust, respect, and love. Those are the qualities that we are applying into it to make sure that our collaborations are meaningful, not only a sort of engagement, but we move from engagement to a meaningful engagement. So those are the areas that we have developed in that. So from that, under the working group, we call the advocacy working group of the Vanuatu Climate Action Network, coming up with the idea of the International Court of Justice, and then using the strategy where we're looking at the Pacific Island student fighting climate change, becoming the strategy of big campaigning across the region and globally as well. So it was the initiatives from the Vanuatu Climate Action Network, and basically it was the initiative of the Vanuatu government. So we're just coming into fitting in those the gap of that. So if we, on that approach, we're looking at civil society organizations as a partner to fill up the gap, as my colleague mentioned. We're all aware that the human resource of the government, there is a limited human resource for the government, and even the finance. So coming in that perspective, fill up those gaps, and enable us to also going into the policy development together with the government to make sure that our policy are reflecting the realities of the communities that we are living in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Misak. And thank you so much to all other panelists for the discussion. It was a very insightful discussion we all had. I'm pretty sure you all have a lot of questions to ask them or other panelists, and that's the reason we have morning tea. So you can all break for morning tea, and please go ahead and ask them, bombard them with your questions. They're more than happy to answer all your questions.